Hello and welcome! In this lecture we're going to add a visual to be able to tell which action is currently selected. Okay, so in the last lecture we created these buttons. Each of them refers to a different action, and by clicking I can select which one I want. Now the only issue is we have no way of knowing which action is currently selected, so let's add some visual to be able to know which button is active. We want to add a nice green outline to be able to see which one is active. For that, let's open up the prefab, so that's the action button UI. Let's double click to go inside of it. And over here, let's create a new UI image. Call this selected and make it stretch to occupy the parent. Now there's a downloadable texture for this lecture. However, before you download it and add it to your project, let's first go into the window and open up the package manager. And over here, we need to add the 2D sprite package. So select this one, let's install. Now go ahead and can download the package from the resources of this lecture. So just go ahead and double click. Then here, make sure to include the border image and import. Okay, so now here under the textures folder, we do see our border. And the reason why we need to install the 2D sprites package is because we need to go over here in the inspector. There's a button for the sprite editor, so click on it. And in here, if you downloaded the file directly from the resource, then everything should already be set up. Basically, we just have a little border sprite and it's got these borders selected. Basically, these borders are important so that we can stretch and scale our image in any shape we want. So if we download the exact same image, there's no need to touch anything here. So let's go ahead, close this window, then go into the selected image. And up here, let's drag the border sprite. And yep, there it is. Now let's make sure that on the image type, on the image component, image type, let's make sure we select sliced. That means we can now scale this in any way and it always looks correct. Then we just need to play around with here the pixels per unit multiplier. So this is basically going to work like the thickness of the border. So let's play around with something. We don't want it to be too thick, just thick enough so we can tint it in some colors. So maybe 2.5, that looks good. And now let's just play around the scale over here on the rect transform. So just set this in order to make sure that it matches visually with the other one. Okay, so with these values it looks correct. Now for the color on the image, let's tint it in green to be our selected action. Okay, so here we have our selected visual. We're going to enable this for the selected action and disable it on the others. So let's save the prefab. And now let's go into the unit action system UI script. And let's make a function on this one. So let's make it private void update the selected visual. We're going to call this function on start. So after creating the buttons, let's call it. And we're also going to call it whenever the selected action changes. Now implementing this is your challenge. We want to show the selected visual for the selected action and hide all of the others. In order to do that, you're going to need to cycle through all the buttons and add a logic on the button UI script to update the selected visual. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video and give that a go. Alright, welcome back. So let's build this. The first thing we need is over here on the action system UI script. Over here we need to keep track of all of the buttons as we create them. So we can do that very simple, just make a list of action button UI. We create the list, then let's instantiate the list on awake. Just create a brand new list. Then let's go into our function to create the buttons. So here we're handling cleanup. So after cleanup, let's go into the list and clear the list. And then we cycle through all of the base actions on this unit, we get the action button UI, and then we just add it to the list. Alright, so we have a list of all our buttons. Then over here, when selecting that one, let's just cycle through that list. Now over here, we want to tell this button to update itself. So let's go into the button itself and let's make that function. So let's make it public void. Let's call it the same thing really. So update the selected visual. And now here we need our selected game object to enable or disable it. So let's make it just like we've done previously. Make a serialized field of type game object for the selected game object. And here in the editor, let's drag the reference. So select the action button. Where's our script? There it is. Let's just drag the select game object. Okay. So now here with this, in order to enable or disable a game object, we can do gameObject.setActive. Then this one takes a true or false, depending on whether we want to enable or disable this game object. So for that, we just need to know if this action that belongs to this button is the one that is currently active. which means we need two things. We need to store the base action for this button, and we need to ask the unit action system for which one is currently active. So let's first store this one. So private base action for the current base action for this button. And then here when we get it, let's set it. Okay. So then over here, let's grab the selected. So the base action for the selected base action, we go into the unit action system, access the instance in order to get the selected base action. And with this, we set it to active if the selected one matches this one. Okay, so that's it, super simple. Now on the UI script, over here we just have to go into the button and tell it to update itself. Alright, so that's really it. Let's test. And yep, right away we do see that it does work. So the move action is selected by default. Now of course the issue is that it does not update, so if I click to select the spin action, it doesn't update, so let's add that. Now we could go with the obvious approach of calling this function on every single update. That would technically work, but it would be very wasteful. So let's do it properly and only update when needed. For that, let's go into the unit action system, so here onto this script. We already have an event being fired when the select unit changes. We really just need another one for when the selected action changes. So let's just duplicate this one, and for this one will be on the selected action changes. And for this it's very simple, we already have it all the way down here, so we've got a function to set the selected unit, we fire off the event, another one to set the selected action, and over here let's fire off the other event, so unselected action changed. Alright, so now we just need to listen to this, so let's go back into our UI script, and over here let's listen to that event. We already have when the selected unit changed, now let's listen to the other one, so the selected action changed. So let's make that function. On the selected action changed. When that happens, let's update the selected visual. And when the unit changes, when we create it, let's also update it. Alright, so that should do it. So if we select a different unit, it's going to create the action buttons for that unit and then update the selected visual. And then if we just swap the action on the same unit, then we just update the selected visual. Alright, so let's test. So here we are, and yep, the move action starts off selected. Now if I click on the spin action, and yep, there you go, it does work. So the spin action is now indeed active, I can click, do my spin, and so on. Now I can also select another unit, and yep, it updates, so the move action is currently active. Now go back to this one, send it, and so on. Alright, awesome, so everything is working correctly. Okay, so in this lecture we added a nice simple visual to be able to see which action is currently selected. Now the next UI element we need right now is we already have the logic so that we can't spam actions. So if I try moving, whilst moving I shouldn't be able to take any other action, but right now there's no indicator that an action is active,